Good evening, students. Today, once again, we are going to discuss types of sentences. This type, we are discussing types of sentences which are based on, uh, which are segregated on the basis of their structure, right? And sometime, in another types of sentences which are based on nature. For example, question. If we ask question, that sentence is called interrogative sentence. Then when there is negation or denial is called negative sentence. Interrogative negative sentence, then declarative sentence, then imperative sentence. So that is another variety. But here we are dis- discussing the types of sentences on the basis of structure, grammatical structure, and on the basis of structure, sentences are divided into four categories: simple sentence, then compound sentence, then complex sentence, and then complex compound sentence or compound complex sentence, right? So first is that's a simple sentence, and all the sentences you have to be familiar with two basic terminology. First is independent clause and second one is dependent clause. So first of all, we have to know what is clause. So clause is a group of words. Phrases are the group of words, clause is a group of words, and sentence is group of words. But the difference is that phrase does not have subject and verb, though it's group of word, but lack of subject and verb, that is called phrase. Then next group of word in which subject and verb is there is called clause. And third category, that is when group of word is there but then there is subject and predicate, means which makes complete sense, is called sentence, right? So on the basis of this, we are going to discuss independent clause. Independent, as name suggests, that does not depend on others. That's a independent clause, means sentence actually, because which makes complete sense. But sometime in a sentence there is subject and verb, but subject, that sentence does not make complete sense, is called dependent clause, right? So we have, when we discuss this type of types of sentences, then we have to be quite familiar with the terminology. That's a independent clause and dependent clause. So always keep in mind, when we discuss independent clause, means that's a combination of subject and predicate, means which makes complete sense or which can stand alone. Whereas when we talk about dependent clause, as name suggests, that that's a combination of subject and verb and then cannot stand alone because it does not make complete sense, right? So that is the basic difference between independent clause and dependent clause. So let us take first type of sentence, that is simple sentence. A simple sentence is made up of one independent clause and no dependent clause. Please take care. In simple sentence, there is just one independent clause and no dependent clause. Please take care, right? Remember, an independent clause. What is independent clause? Contains subject and predicate. Contains a subject and predicate and a predicate. Please take care. One subject and one predicate, and expresses complete thought. On the other hand, an dependent clause contains subject and verb, right? So difference is what? Independent clause is, that is independent clause, right? Independent clause means subject and a predicate, whereas dependent clause means subject and verb. So please take care. Independent clause means subject and predicate, Whereas dependent clause means subject is common, here subject is common, here subject is common, but here predicate and here verb. So that is why it does not express complete thought, or it does not can stand alone. What? Dependent clause. Please take care. So I'm repeating because which is very important. They are just trying to recall us. That's a independent clause and dependent clause. Independent means subject and predicate and makes complete sense, and dependent is subject and verb and does not make complete sense. Okay, so that is simple sentence. Example is she sings beautifully. What's the subject here? She sings beautifully. That's a predicate. That's the subject and that's the predicate. Makes complete sense. Next one is the cat is taking a nap. The cat is subject. Subject is the word or group of words which we are talking about. Here we are talking about cat. Then is taking a nap. Makes complete sense. However, verb is this is taking, but taking a nap, that is the predicate. Here this is predicate, this is predicate. Then he ran, this is a subject. Sorry. He is the subject. Then ran to catch the bus is the predicate. This is the subject, he is the subject, ran to catch the bus. The detail what, why ran to catch the bus is making complete sense. That is called. However, he ran also complete sense. Why? Because he ran, right? But to catch the bus is more detail. But in this case also that's a simple sentence. Or suppose to catch the bus, he ran to catch the, this is also sentence, but simple sentence. Why? Because one subject and one predicate. Okay, now this is a brief structure. One is structure in which we understand. That's a simple sentence. So that's a here the sun is shining brightly today. Subject is the sun, is shining brightly today is the predicate, right? So that is independent clause because one subject and one predicate. Very simple, we have already discussed it, right? So please take care. Okay, now number 2, that is compound sentence, right? So what is compound sentence? As name suggests that this is a compound sentence, right? So compound sentence means that's a compound sentence contains two or more independent clause. Two or more independent clause. Please take care. And a comma or the coordinating conjunction or semicolon. What? Comma, coordinating conjunction or semicolon. This is called semicolon. Join the clauses, right? So sometime actually there's a, in other words I'm telling you, and just read it, read here. That's a, there is no no dependent clause. Please take care, there is no dependent clause. Now compound sentence, sorry compound sentence is the compound sentence is two or more independent sentences. One independent plus independent plus independent, right? Here also I can write one independent sentence, then another independent sentence, then another. How many can be, but these all are joined by, that's a independent sentence, sometime joined by comma, then independent, or joined by semicolon, that's a semicolon, that is independent. Or sometime independent is joined by independent is an independent joined by but, or joined by independent joined by or then independent, or independent is joined by uh, Independent is joined by I and independent plus independent. So this, there are three chances. That's a all independent sentences contains two or more. So independent clauses, sentences clauses are joined by comma or conjunction, coordinating conjunction. These are example of coordinating conjunction or semicolon, right? And there is no dependent clause. Okay, now example, I enjoy hiking, right? So that's a I enjoy hiking complete. If you read this sentence up to here, I enjoy hiking, making the complete sense, but which is joined by but, and you know that but means contradictory. If this is positive, this is something negative or another type of sentence. But my twin sister prefers swimming, right? So my twins, if you read from here, my twin sister prefers swimming, is also making complete sense. So here this is independent clause, this is independent clause joined by coordinating conjunction but. Let us see another example. The sun was shining brightly. Of course, that's a up to brightly. That's a complete. Sun was, so that makes the complete sense. That is independent clause. We decided to have a family beach day. That is independent clause joined by so, right? So this is the difference. This is that there are two independent joined by conjunction. So that is also conjunction. So comma is also there. Here comma is also there. Now my younger brother loves football, right? He practices every day as much as he can. This is called semicolon, right? My younger brother loves football makes complete sense, independent clause, but that is joined. Why? Because he indicates my younger brother. But if you read he separately, that is also making complete sense. That's a he practices every day as much as he can. So that is also making complete sense, right? But joining is that but. So these are these are coordinating conjunction, and this is semicolon, right? So these are the example of compound sentences. Now, so what is compound sentence? Compound sentence is two or more independent sentences joined by conjunction or comma or semicolon. So first independent sentence is that the sun is shining brightly today. Another, we are going to the beach, right? Independent joined by and. So that is the example of compound sentence. Okay, now next is complex sentence. Complex sentences, this complex, as name suggests, complex, little bit complex. So complex sentence comprises one independent clause for support, which is also called main. Independent clause is also called main clause or chief clause or what is called main clause, right? So that is called main clause, and at least one dependent clause, maybe more, but one independent clause is very important. In complex sentence, one independent clause and other clause are dependent on that independent clause, but one support, that is called independent clause or main clause, is very important, and rest of the dependent clause are also called subordinating clause, right? Now, a complex sentence comprises one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. If the dependent clause precedes the independent clause, then a comma is needed to connect them. But if the independent clause is first, then independent clause is first, then the clauses are joined with subordinating conjunction, right? So but if the independent clause is first, then subordinate, just now I told you that subordinating clause, that is a, right? So that's a, then the clauses are joined with subordinating conjunction, means independent clause is joined by because, right? And so that something something. Very important note, what if the dependent clause precedes the independent clause, right? So precedes mean here dependent clause, then here independent. I'm explaining here. If the there is this situation, dependent clause then independent clause, then a comma is needed to connect them. For example, I'm giving example. If you water the plant, water the plant, listen, है ना? I cannot write much here, but yes, I'm speaking you, I think you must have got. If you water the plant, so that is precedes, that dependent clause precedes, means first dependent clause comes, right? Then the independent clause, that's it will grow. For example, if you water the plant, it will grow. Suppose this is the example, it will grow, then that is it will grow is independent clause. So here it will be joined by connect by comma, that is very important. But if situation is vice versa, means first example is that, for example, I have to go now, because that is called, because is called subordinating conjunction, because my mother is waiting for me. So that my mother is waiting for me is independent, right? So here I have to go, that is the independent clause is, sorry, I have, my mother is waiting, right? Waiting for me, as she is not well. So as she is not well is dependent, so here it will be joined by subordinating conjunction. I'll be giving example in later on, right? Now example here, okay, I finished the project, I went outside for a walk. What they are saying, comma, means dependent clause precedes the independent clause, then comma, then comma is needed. Dependent clause is preceded, that's the dependent clause is preceded by independent clause, right? So here dependent clause is, I finished the project, that is depend, because if you read I finished the project, that not makes complete sense. I went outside for a walk, that makes complete sense, that is independent sentence. But here what's the situation is that dependent clause, this dependent clause precedes the independent clause, means first dependent clause then independent clause. So then situation will be like this, comma, dependent clause, that's a dependent clause, and that is independent clause, right? Now another example, due to her determination and grit, due to her determination and grit, question is, so what? That is also dependent clause. She won first place in the swimming competition making complete sense is independent clause, which is joined by comma, right? So if dependent, in other words, you just understand, if dependent clause comes first, means then dependent clause comes first, then independent clause will be connected by comma. Listen, I'm repeating. If dependent clause comes first in the sentence, then independent, of course, after dependent clause, independent clause will come. So when sentence start with dependent clause, then independent clause will be connected with the comma, right? Or in other words, when in a sentence dependent clause comes first, then independent clause will be joined by a comma. That's the first two examples are there. Now let's see third one. We did not attend the ceremony. Independent clause, right? Not dependent on other. That's a separate, makes complete sense. We didn't attend the ceremony. Now that is called subordinating conjunction, because this is giving support. Reason, because we all came down with the flu. That's the reason, right? So here complex sentence, we did not attend the, that is called independent comes first, and then this is called dependent. Why? Because it start with because, and that is called subordinating conjunction, which is given here. That's a subordinating conjunction. What's the see? If the independent clause comes first, then the clauses are joined by subordinating conjunction, right? So I think it's clear to you now. Now complex sentence. Complex sentences starting is dependent first, because the sun is shining brightly. Definitely question is, so what? So that is why this is dependent clause. Then we are going to the beach, independent clause, and that is joined by comma. Very good thing you should learn here with this example. That is because just we have read that because is subordinating conjunction, but our major concern is not subordinating conjunction. Our concern is that how sentence start with dependent or start with independent. Here in this case, sentence starts with dependent clause, and when sentence start with dependent clause will be joined by comma with independent clause. You just have to keep in mind. Why? Because if we see the example here, because is coming, but here why because is coming, and that is because we all, that is actually dependent clause, right? And that's why because of because, right, that is dependent clause. However, this is separate and independent clause, right? So please take care. Don't go with because here because is nothing. Our major concern is that this is dependent clause, because as we read, because the sun is shining brightly, then question is, the sentence is not making complete sense. So that is why it is joined by comma, and this is independent clause which making complete sense. That is, we are going to beach. So that please take care, right? Fourth category is compound complex sentence. What is fourth category? Compound complex. Compound means and something, example and complex sentence means independent, at least one independent and maybe two or more dependent clause. That's a complex sentence. Let us see what the definition. A compound complex sentence contains two or more independent clauses, two or more, or at least one dependent clause, at least one dependent clause, or two or, why? Because of, why this definition? Compound means two or more independent clauses are found in compound sentence and complex sentence. At least one dependent clause is fulfilling the condition of complex sentence, right? Let us see the example. We tried our best, but we still we tried our best, but we still did not win first place, and we were disappointed with the result. Have you noticed that compound complex sentence have examples are very big? Why? Because here compound means at least two independent clause, right, and then one dependent clause. So three clauses are must in a sentence. That is why this is compound complex sentence. Let us see what is independent, what is dependent. We try our best, that is independent, right? But we still did not win first place, independent, and we were disappointed with the result, that is dependent, right? Okay, now Lucy went to the store. Lucy went to the store, okay, independent clause, and while she was there, that is dependent clause, she ran into an old friend, independent clause, whom she had not seen years, dependent clause. So they decided, that is, they decided to grab a cup of tea and catch up, right? That is also independent clause, right? Now, wait a minute, beta. Now, Johan finished his homework early, so we decided to go for a walk. But when started raining, dependent clause, right? When, I cannot write here because this will be overlapped by it. Okay, I'm reading for you. Johan finished his homework early, independent clause. So we decided to go for a walk, right? That is dependent clause. But when it started raining, dependent clause, we had to return home, independent clause, right? So this is the complex. Let us see example, last slide. Compound complex sentence, independent clause and dependent clause. Last one is dependent clause. Independent clause, the sun is shining brightly today, first sentence, right? And is conjunction. We are going to the beach, independent clause. So that is independent, that is independent. And dependent is, but we will never but we will never go to buy sunscreen and snakes. But, because sentence start with but, and that is why it is dependent clause, right? So that is all for today. We are going to discuss some more regarding sentences. Thank you. God bless you.